Good morning. Welcome, everybody. We appreciate you being here. My name is John Milliken. I have the privilege of chairing the board of the Virginia Port Authority, in large part due to his probably mistaken appointment made in the spring of 2002 when he first asked me to join the port board, which I did, and I watched it grow and flourish. In large part due to his continuing support. Senator Warner has been here as first as a Commonwealth Transportation Board member.
Under a certain Secretary of Transportation. Mostly people are not old enough to know you were actually Transportation Secretary in the early 90s.
Yeah, that's right.
Means you're really old.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. This wasn't the 1890s. But he started coming here as a board member for the Transportation Board, as he said, in the early 1990s, and then as governor came here several times to encourage its continued growth, and has been a frequent visitor as United States Senator. So we are delighted to have him here with us today. I want to introduce Faith Power, who's also a member of the Port Authority Board, and importantly from this area. Faith is the designated board member under the statute. There needs to be somebody who lives in and has an appreciation for this particular part of the state, and Faith certainly does that. She also serves as vice chairman of the board, so we're particularly pleased to have her with us this morning. And Delegate Wendy Goditis, who is with us as well, and a supporter of the Port Authority. We need to go to the legislature from time to time to ask for its permission to do certain things, and every now and then to ask them for a little money from capital to help us accomplish our growth at the port. And the legislature has been an enthusiastic partner for the Port of Virginia, and Delegate Goditis has certainly been an important part of that, and we appreciate her service. We've had 5 very strong years of growth at the Port Authority, remaking ourselves for the 21st century. That growth spurt will cause and encourage growth at the inland port as well. With Senator Warner's support and help, we were able to secure what's called a build grant to add additional trackage here, because that, after all, that's our inventory. How much space have we got for the rail cars that move our product in and out? And we're going to be adding additional track, and with the support of the region and the Commonwealth, changing the configuration of the interchange that serves this area to make ingress and egress simpler. And this facility serves 2 critically important functions. One, it gives a reach from the Hampton Roads area into the heartland of Virginia and out toward the heartland of America, which is our marketplace. If you're in the agricultural business or manufacturing business in the central part of the country, we're your access to the world's markets. And whether it comes through the Virginia Inland Port or directly to the ports in Hampton Roads, we're the way you get to the rest of the world. So around this port, importantly, has built a number of manufacturing facilities, distribution facilities, handlers of the product that come in and out of here. And that's good for the region and a critical reason that the inland port was put here in the first place. So not only does it help us get our product off of dockside quickly and efficiently by putting it on a rail car and sending it north, but it also encourages economic development in another region of the state. So none of that could be done without the support of our officials at the state level and importantly at the federal level. And again, Senator Warner, we're delighted to have you with us today.
Well, thank you, John. Thank you very much. And Faith, it's great to see you, Wendy, and to see so many friends from around the valley. I know we've got obviously Warren County represented and Frederick County represented, City of Winchester. We have Clark County. Am I missing? Did I miss anybody? And obviously, Chamber and business groups and others. And I'm really grateful for everybody being here. I would be remiss and get my butt in real trouble if I didn't also give a shout out to my dear friend Russ Potts, who cannot be here today, but we need to. I always salute Russ, and he's obviously done a lot for both the Maritime Association and the port. It is amazing how what's happened here. And I think it was Jerry Belias that started.
It was.
So
1989.
The idea that in 1989 there was enough of a vision to say, hey, we need to think about a multimodal facility in the top of the valley that can link and be a combination point to bring access to the port. It really is a lot of foresight, and Jerry was a great infrastructure governor. Miss him. He passed away 18 months ago or so, but a real vision here. And as John indicated, I've been pleased to try to be as supportive as I can of the inland port, both as my time as governor and my time as senator. And was really glad to work with the port leadership when we got the $15.5 million build grant back in 2018, and that took some individual lobbying with Secretary Chow at that point, who actually was very, very good to Virginia and her tenure as Secretary of Transportation. Again, appreciate everybody coming out, into the summer. I was hoping we were going to be past this stage of recovery, but when I set up this event, we're on the Senate out of session, so I do these, try to run around Virginia as much as I can during the recess, and I thought that what would be still dominating the news, and it would be the first question on everybody's out of everybody's, gosh, Warner, that was great that you passed that bipartisan infrastructure plan, and when are we going to see the dough? As I was driving here this morning, I realized we literally passed the infrastructure bill out of the Senate with 69 votes 13 days ago. Less than 2 weeks ago. But I don't know about you, but in my world, that feels like it was 6 months ago or a year ago, because so much other things have happened. Obviously not all good internationally, and some of the other confounding stuff in Washington. But I do want to talk a little bit about the infrastructure bill, what it'll do for the port, what it'll do for the valley, and then I want to hear. This is a wide open session. We can talk about any of the constraints or limitations you may have on, as particularly those of you from local government, on the ARP money. Remember, that was the March set of dollars. Use that wisely. I don't think you're going to see another slug at any point soon. It was as Wendy knows, both at the Commonwealth level, we got about $4.3 billion, and at the local government level, about $3 billion. It really was a substantial infusion of one-time capital. The infrastructure plan, which again I was proud to be one of the negotiators, architects, what have you, is also, I think, historic in nature. It's $542 billion of infrastructure investment over a 5-year span. And I remember as we were putting it together, some of the folks in my political party, some of the really progressive Democrats, were going, Warner, what's so hard about an infrastructure bill? It's roads, bridges, and broadband, resiliency. Yeah, that's all popular. I won't call out the senator that was saying that to me. If it's so damn easy, why did it take us 45 years to pass a plan like this? And as somebody who, I have a lot of pride in my time as governor of Virginia, but one of the areas that while we were able to get our budget back in order, one of the areas we weren't able to do successful on, and frankly got my tail beat, was on the transportation infrastructure that we tried to put in place on a referendum basis in Northern Virginia. Hampton Roads got beat on both of them. And the problem has been, maybe not so much here in the Valley, but in Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads, the cost of commuting keeps going up every year. On average, I mean, the latest estimate is about $517 per Virginian commuting cost additional needed. So this idea of a massive, not even once in a generation, but once in literally 45 years plus investment nationally in infrastructure, I think is extraordinarily important. Let me take a couple minutes and talk about the component parts. A lot of this are just big numbers, but I'm happy as we get into the conversation stage to drill down on any component part. In that number, there's about $110 billion on roads and bridges. Virginia, at the minimum, will get about $7 billion to VDOT. There's also a lot of competitive grant programs on bridge replacement. We've got about 700 bridges in Virginia at this point that are in a major stage of delay and decay. And I've been, since my time in politics in Virginia, we've been talking about repairing and expanding and improving access to 81. I remember back when I was governor, there was even a prayer group that would meet every Wednesday in Roanoke to pray for people's safety with all the truck traffic on 81. We are going to see sizable investments on, I believe, it'll be decided by the Commonwealth, but we should get in terms of expansion on 81. We've got to go down a little bit later Monday, to some of the overpasses in Harrisonburg and talk about the same subject. For ports, there's about $17 billion, which will be really important, and there's a lot of the port activity down Hampton Roads that will have possibilities for expansion, but I believe we'll even have some of those dollars available for the inland port. We've got, I'm going to get some of these, I've got a cheat sheet here in a minute. $66 billion for rail, which will be huge. A lot of that, some of that's going to go to Amtrak and Washington to New York, but a big chunk is open for freight. We've got, I think, 40-some billion for transit. Normally we think about transit, kind of metros and big cities, but we've got a series of new programs in here for more middle market transit, whether that be, bus systems, in communities like a Winchester and elsewhere, and other transit forms. We've got, for the first time ever, the federal government is really putting its money where its mouth is in terms of resiliency, about $47 billion on that. And that will mean seawalls and flooding in Hampton Roads. It'll mean fire protection in the west, but obviously there'll be resiliency projects in the valley as well. I forget the number on water, but we've, one of the things we don't talk about enough in infrastructure is our aging water systems, whether it be lead pipes or just water systems that are really old. And I think the number's upwards of 30 billion plus on repairing and replacing water systems. Something I'm really jazzed about, $65 billion for broadband. And I think one of the things that we've all probably learned to appreciate post-COVID, that high-speed broadband connectivity is not a nice to have, it is a necessity. Your community is not even going to get looked at if you don't have that high-speed connectivity to all of your citizens. And I'm really glad the governor and I pride him a bit on this, because some states I think are going to wait for this next round of broadband money, the $65 billion that's going to come out of this bill. I said Virginia needs to get ahead of this. We'd already put $10 billion in the March bill. He then took so we got $200 million out of that, and $500 million that Wendy and her colleagues approved. So we had a $700 million head start on broadband, and I think it was really smart what the legislature did a couple years ago to allow the utilities to go ahead and build the middle mile. So that, combined with the money that you've got and what's in the pipeline, there should be no reason why we may not get to 100%, but 97, 98% full coverage. And my hope again is that if Virginia can get out in front, there may be so much money pouring into broadband that could be a bit of a glut, and trying to make sure that your community's got a broadband plan. And one of the things I'm trying to make sure is we have it at our community colleges, training for installers, because there's going to be a lot of work in the broadband field. Then on just a couple one-off topics, and then I'll open it up to questions and comments. Also in the infrastructure bill, there's about $65 billion, $70 billion around energy items. And, this has not been, didn't get all that much attention, but it really is the first time the federal government, has made a real investment in trying to upgrade our grid. We've been talking about smart grid for 20 years. We haven't really done much. This is the first time we put some real dollars on that. We've done some dollars on kind of climate-related items in terms of abandoned well mitigation. But we're also putting in, there's at least seed capital in place for how you're going to move to the next generation as we move towards electric vehicle. Can we put out more charging stations? Can we actually, one of the things I got pretty excited about is, the country's going to buy about 25,000 new school buses over the next 5 years. Most of them will probably be either, most of them will be electric, quite honestly. And the question right now is, are they going to be made in America or are they going to be made in China? We put some seed capital in to hopefully build up some of that infrastructure for electric vehicle buses being made here. And we've got a great company named Merriman that's down in Southside. Remember Sonny Merriman? Was it involved with Virginia Tech and stuff? My hope is that we could build some of that activity. And obviously, one of the other areas that may come in this next bill, which may or may not happen, is again commitment around cleaner energy sources. And one of the things that Virginia's, I'm going to be with John later this week, is we really try to make sure Virginia becomes the leader in offshore wind. And our hope again is that we may even get some manufacturing out of that, which would be really, really great. All that ties back in to, as the inland port being the gateway to our market in the Midwest, this facility is going to become all the more important. So with the bill grant you got in 2018, being the 8,000 jobs that are dependent upon this port, I think will grow dramatically. There will be, again, additional potential capital as needed. So I am very enthusiastic about getting this passed. I've been making the case to the White House that due to other circumstances, the president needs a win, and I would hope the House would go ahead and put together a bipartisan coalition in the House as well, because I know if a vote were to be held this week, it would be strongly bipartisan and get a good majority. So, that's kind of the state of play. We can start around port questions, but I don't get a chance to visit, get out here as much as I did when I was governor. But if anybody wants to raise, other items, or you got a complaint with the federal government, which everybody does, I would be happy to hear. Oh, one last thing that I think I pushed for a lot, and one of the things we're trying to do with a lot of this new money, and I had a whole infrastructure bank in the bill that unfortunately got dropped out at the last minute because of an unrelated item, but we did increase private activity bonds, which we've used a lot in Virginia in terms of public-private partnerships, kind of the ability to partner with private capital. But one of the things we've tried to do is, that actually started under the Obama administration, was trying to, on projects of national significance, trying to expedite the permitting process. One of the things that I am the first to acknowledge is somebody that can still claim for another year or so that I was in business longer than in government. We have a well-intentioned regulatory structure, but sometimes when it takes 5 to 7 years before you can put a shovel in the ground because of the regulatory process, that obviously drives up the costs of any project. And there was an expedited process that started under President Obama that President Trump developed a little bit more, but we're really trying to put a lot of this new capital into this kind of, it's called fast forward project that would be an expedited permitting. So hopefully that will speed along some of the projects that might be important in the region. So again, my thanks to everybody. The floor is now open. Should we run around the room, do a quick 5-second hello of everybody, and then we'll come back to questions? Why don't we?
Chuck DeHaye, Board of Supervisors, Frederick County.
Chuck,
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, sir.
Dan DeLella, Equus Capital Partners, private equity real estate development firm.
Great to see you.
John Fox, here representing Top of Virginia Regional Chamber.
Mark Merrill, Commonwealth Transportation Board and Go Virginia Board. Cheryl Cullors, Warren County Board of Supervisors.
Ed Daly, Warren County Administrator.
Nicole Foster, Front Royal, Warren County Chamber of Commerce.
Samantha Price, Eagle Systems Operations Manager.
Mayor Smith, Winchester.
Dan Hoffman, City Manager, Winchester.
I'm Chris Boyce, the County Administrator in Clark.
David Weiss, Clark County Board of Supervisors.
Mary Beth Price, I'm Interim County Administrator for Frederick County.
I'm Brandon Davis. I'm the Executive Director of the Regional Commission in the Northern Shenandoah Valley that serves these communities.
Jay Langston, Director of Shenandoah Valley Partnership.
I'm Chris Thompson. I work with Interchange. We're a third-party logistics, transportation, and development company exclusively here in the Commonwealth.
Wendy Gooditis, member of the House of Delegates representing House District 10.
Guys, go ahead.
Andrew Sinclair with the Board of Virginia.
Charlie with the Northern Virginia Daily.
Pepper Martin, Russ Potts Productions.
Lee Cranford, Board of Virginia.
Daniel LeGrand, Board of Virginia.
Zach Franz, Russ Potts Productions.
The others are my folks, I guess. So who wants to, question, comment, suggestion, criticism, who wants to go first?
I have a question.
Please, Mark.
What do you envision the process going to be for the allocation of funds?
Most of this money will go through traditional funding formulas. The one thing that could even break apart a bipartisan coalition is if you start messing with the funding formulas. There will be some new initiatives, like there'll be around the bridges, for example. There's going to be a new program. So I'll get to my cheat sheet here. There will be a series of new programs. There'll be the RAISE grant that was formerly billed. There'll be National Infrastructure Project Assistance. This is stuff that still is obviously still have to pass the House and hopefully make it signed by the President. There's some of this that's going to be expedited, be pushed out very quickly. But my hope is that unlike when we did this to a certain degree after the 2008 economic crisis, or even a little bit with COVID, my hope is that communities will look at this not just as what's short-term shovel-ready, but really is what are the needs of the community or the region over a 5, 10, 15-year period. Because I don't think you're going to see this kind of one-time infusion of cash happening again anytime in the short term. So I don't think being first in line on this necessarily makes sense, but there will be some of these new programs, but it will go through the normal CTB and other process. And some on the others, like on the resiliency, on the broadband, some of that will go state, some of that will go directly to local, but some of that still needs to be worked through.
I mean, the reason I ask is because to me it's so important to create infrastructure investments that are permanent. Like your comment about manufacturing capability for electric vehicles and buses, I mean, that would be a long-lasting economic impact as opposed to repairing 50 bridges and then 40 years from now we'll have to repair them again.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think that's what our hope is. There was some pushback on, one of the debates on electric vehicle infrastructure or the buses. And a business guy, David in terms of used to be in the venture capital and business, is I didn't think the federal government would spend 100 cents on the dollar on putting together a electric vehicle charging stations, which will be frankly the future gas stations in our country. But they can put some seed capital, and then if you can get long-term debt behind it, there's going to be a business proposition there. And again, my hope is that, especially on say the EV charging stuff, that we think seriously in Virginia about how we want to organize that. And I hope that the CTB and others will. Whether the initial question is, will it even fit within CTB's purview, or will it be somewhere else? And that's, I think, still to be determined.
You mentioned there were $17 billion allocated towards ports. Was there an amount that was earmarked towards the Virginia ports, and what might some of those improvements be?
The ports component has not been allocated. It will be, I believe, a competitive grant program. Is that right, John?
I think that's correct.
It has not been allocated. You know, there's another batch of dough since, as we know, you know, a lot of our port money goes to the Army Corps of Engineers. And, how do I say this politically delicately? We got, the Port of Virginia, frankly, had a New Start designation that we applied for a couple years back. We didn't get it, in faith. And it was egregious politics that suddenly Texas got moved in front of us in January of 2021. That being said, in the kind of normal funding stream, we got the, what was it, $88 million, I think, that we needed to fill the gap. So we are back in line on, which expansion is that? Was that the do you remember?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
This is, the question was the 88, the
Right.
big port investment that we were in line to get the New Start. We kind of got screwed.
Right.
That's a technical term. And then we got the money back in, but that was for the next level of dredging, or was that?
Yeah,
for-
no, what we are slowly deepening and widening the channel to gain access for the bigger ships, although we can handle the ones who are coming today. There are larger ones in the pipeline who will be coming in the next 5 years. So this will allow us to handle even those bigger ships and be the only port on the East Coast that's able to do that. It will also allow ships to pass each other in the channel. The Navy was not real happy about the thought that there'd be a commercial container ship in the channel and the aircraft carrier couldn't get out for the 3 or 4 hours that the channel was being used by a commercial carrier. So they were our ally in getting the widening as well as the deepening of the channel. But it's a big ticket item. The state, thank you, has fronted the money, but the feds ultimately will owe $175 million for their share.
And we are getting to kind of catch up, so we would have been, you know, the Army Corps clearly recommended us number one. There was some funny business, and there was an $88 million gap. We got that back in the budget.
And just in regards to the inland port, what are some of the items that have been identified, if there have been any, as either things that are planning to be improved or wish list items?
We've got our operations manager back. Do you want to, you already talked about the build grant, the $15.5 million, but what else you got on your wish list?
Space, first and foremost. So we have 161 acres that we own here, only about 95 of which is, asphalted and workable. So I think that would be certainly one item that, would be on our wish list. Mine in particular, I always could use more space. But also, we've made heavy investments in automation, down in Hampton Roads with tremendous success. And I hope to see some of that, in the distant future, move up here to this region and be used at the inland port.
But aren't you moving, you said that you're getting, John, about 3 of the cranes?
Yeah, right now, 3 rubber tire gantry cranes and 3 additional tracks with the build grant.
So, are being
Picking up on what he said, we would love to partner with the community and a local landowner for additional space, because at the end of the day, what really matters to us is, do we have the facilities up here that will attract users to a transload facility, to a distribution center, to a light manufacturing facility? And we stand ready in some creative way to partner with a willing landowner, developer to do that.
And what we was talking about is, we got 5 tracks now, we're adding 3, and these And the gantries, we can pick up the containers, you can only stack them to 2 at this point, you'll be able to stack them 5 high, right? See, quick seconds.
Yeah. Senator Jay Langston, Shenandoah Valley Partnership. You know, as an economic developer, we call infrastructure very broadly. Is there provisions for training to provide the workers to do all of this construction? That's a real concern. I'm wondering how broadly this is defined as infrastructure in the bill, and hopefully it'll be decoupled with the.
Yeah. Truthfully, if we just put $5 trillion into the economy in the last year, you know, trying to keep the economy open. And I think almost all of it, all bipartisan. There are certain areas we were probably a little excessive. I think historically we'll look back and say we did the right thing to get through this, you know, shutdown. The area that I think we were short was training. And I saw something this morning. 62% of all Americans who are working are thinking about getting a new job. There's never, you know, I think, you know, I don't think it has anything to do with the unemployment benefits or anything else. It's just like, you know, I think COVID made everybody think for a moment, what do I want to do with my life? And most of the training dollars are going to be in the, you know, the so-called next one. One of the things that I voted for that we wanted to get through was to take all of the constraints off of the ARP money, you know, the March money, so that you at the local level, if you want to put some of that, or Wendy at the state level wants to put some of that into direct training, you can do it. I'm really excited about the broadband training dollars. I think it was overwhelmingly going to be supported. Brought the administration around. You know, because of the sausage making process, it didn't get in. It would require more time than we have. But you know, but I would urge, whether you're an economic development authority or local government, to kind of push the edge of the envelope on if you've got, you know, county dollars, city dollars, David. If you've got some excess one time, and use this for training, and I will be helpful to try to make sure that it passes muster.
Thank you.
I wanted to know if I could make a comment on that. So the ARP money at the state level, we were given $4.3 billion.
You're welcome.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So thankfully, we in Virginia are very careful with our budgets, and we have set aside $1 billion in case this stuff keeps blowing up. Now, my hope is that we can all get vaccinated, all keep our masks on, and then we'll have $1 billion to spend. And at that point, I don't see why I shouldn't be talking to you and others about the possibility of putting some money into that. So feel free to reach out.
Thank you.
And let's keep our masks on and get vaccinated so that we can
And also,
do
we
that.
got good news on that. Pfizer just got approved, FDA formal approval this morning for full. So hopefully that'll mean get rid of one less excuse for not to. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. One of the questions with the expansion of the inland port, and we're very much in favor and want to promote that, what can we do to look at the infrastructure outside the port? Particularly, example being, we have a couple of roads out here that are constantly being blocked by the trains. And the train's explanation is that they're waiting to get in, or they're waiting to get out. They're blocking the traffic, and as much as in the north end and in the south end of the county, and they're doing this as much as an hour at a time. And that is something we need to address, the infrastructure around those crossings.
Great question. You know, I'm not sure I'm going to fix it from Washington. I'm going to leave that one. But I think there should be, you know, some of these are going to take major road adjustments. You know, because I think you're going to have to, as you said, you want the port to continue to expand. So, you know, if you're increasing the capacity to 8 tracks instead of 5, that will be helpful. But if it keeps growing, I don't think you probably are still gonna have some backups. I'm way above my knowledge level now, but my sense would be, the county ought to look to VDOT and others on, all right, can we get an ability, whether it's to build an overpass or some other way to relieve this?
In Hampton Roads, there obviously were similar kinds of issues, and in a couple of instances, we were able, excuse me, to get the improvement put on the regional plan first, so that the local governments could advocate for it in the annual hearings before the CTB. But the port is perfectly happy, willing, eager to be supportive of something like that. And as the senator said, the maritime or port-related dollars, a little more flexible in how they can be used. Probably couldn't pay for the whole thing, but if it's on the plan and the state's funding a piece of it, we may be able to help with it as well.
And guess who can help get it on the plan? Mark Merrill right over here.
But the key step, as you know, is getting it on the regional plan.
And
Andrew, you...
Just to expand upon Chairman Mills and your point, we've talked about the build grant. One of the key components for that is building a grade crossing at Rockland Road. So, as we're talking about adding 3 tracks here, part of that there are 2 components to that project. The outside of the gate component is building a grade crossing, which VDOT is taking the lead on the design and construction. So that's an integral part of that project. And I think there are going to be, through this infrastructure bill, once the House passes and the President signs it, some additional opportunities to pursue those kinds of projects as well through CRISI, which is one of the freight rail programs, and as well to look for additional opportunities there.
So my hope, 2 cents of unsolicited free advice for, just Warren County, but every county, is to say, with some of the one-time county money and city money you got out of ARP, whether you need to hire some consultants or engineers, whatever, to make sure you've got your planning process started, so that presuming, never presume anything in DC, we can screw up a sure thing almost any time, but, any rational basis means this infrastructure bill is going to become law, hopefully in September, October, and it'll then take some time before these new programs get kind of through the process, but trying to get your planning in place now, I think, would be important. That make sense?
Makes a great deal of sense, sir. It's just that all of our broadband money's gonna go, it's gonna be, all our APA money's gonna go into broadband.
God bless you. Are you doing that with the rural electric co-op, or just doing it on?
With Shenandoah Valley and REC and Dominion, and then All Points Broadband. It's a combination, a consortium.
We, and this again, I'll come over here in 1 second, but just, if we can, we need to make these commitments, because my fear is there's gonna be a shortage of fiber next year. So locking in those contracts, but also, I would hope maybe the partnership or others could look around about how are we gonna train enough people to do this level of installation. And, I know I could get some money from the legislature to help support that. We ought to have, Frank, I was talking to Secretary of Commerce this morning at the national level, there ought to be a prepackaged plan put out that any community college or whatever could put in place very quickly, like this fall. Please.
My question was going to be a follow-up on that, Senator. Each of the communities in this region and a couple of the counties outside of the region are exploring a regional VATI application, Virginia Telecommunications Initiative. That is the program where the $700 million is funded through the state of Virginia. That program requires a local match in order to be competitive. The scale of the universal coverage that each of these communities is looking at will just about take all of their ARP funding. So when we talk about the other projects and we think about the $65 billion that's coming for infrastructure specific to broadband, are these communities making the right choice to invest now rather than wait?
Great question. And my gut, and this is not, take this as a business guy, not as a senator, is I would make those investments. My hope, because even when you make those commitments, it's gonna take you a couple of years to spend that out, is if this additional money comes in, you can supplant and get your ARP money back. You shouldn't be penalized for going first if there's a big slug following behind it. That's the rational, smart, business-like way to approach this. Now, you may say, well, in that case, Warner, it's not gonna happen, but that is my intent, and one of the things that, you can careful how I say this, the biggest chunk of this money, the 65 billion, about 40 of it is gonna go for build out, roughly 2025 will go more towards affordability and other things. Some of the affordability programs so far have not been that successful because the incumbents have simply upsold the customer. So we're trying to deal with that, but what we have done is, instead of having this money, this gets into the sausage making, instead of having the money go through the FCC, which I believe is a former, for those of you who knew, my business was called Nextel before I went into politics, so this is a subject I know a little bit about. And frankly, the incumbents had captured the FCC. So instead, we're going to put it through the National Telecommunications NTIA, which is out of Commerce, which will be a more flexible funding tool. But you gotta hold me, and I need to hold them accountable, because nothing would be worse than if you used all your ARP money to get in line, and somehow then you can't supplant with the money coming downstream. So just to give you a sense of this, the 10 billion that we ran through the March program amounted, on just the formula basis, $220 million for Virginia. So if we are just a straight line running before you get to affordability, you got 4x that, we're gonna have another 880 million coming on top of the 700 million. So there is no reason why we can't get everybody covered. But to your point, I'm not saying there's zero risk, but there's enough states that are moving ahead on this, and I was trying to get the ARP, we're talking again, the Secretary of Commerce today about, let's push more states and localities to go ahead and use that ARP money around broadband, but we want to make sure you can supplant that. I'm saying the same thing, but I'd take the risk.
Thank you.
But if it doesn't work out, I'm not going to be in big trouble.
So in that line, part of the issues with federal grants and such are the limitations placed on them by the federal government. In relation to the ARP, some of the broadband speeds that are required would have limited the number of households that we could have used that money for. And so, do you feel that government restrictions will be less or more flexible to allow localities to deal with them on a case-by-case basis to honor the intent of the program as opposed to the numbers?
It's never going to be as flexible as we want. But I think there's going to be enough funding coming, and big battle between affordability versus access. Most of the people in the valley need access first. You got my commitment. I'm going to try to get you that flexibility as much as possible. There was a effort, and it would have gotten 90 votes if we could have offered this amendment that would have said all of the restrictions on ARP, because the ARP money, technically supposed to be COVID related, and the only place we gave, infrastructure full out was broadband. So what we were trying to do was let's say to all of the ARP money, state and local, and this is more frankly on the state level, we're going to allow you to use it for any kind of infrastructure beyond just COVID related expenses. We didn't get that because technically we just given that amendment offered, but that was clearly the strong bipartisan implications. So I hope that means in implementing, we will try to give you as much flexibility as possible. It's one of the reasons why we affirmatively fought against the kind of incumbents, so it wouldn't go to the FCC. Because as you know, and not to get, I want to take a couple more questions, and I can yap too much on this subject because I'm too much in the weeds. But as you, I'm sure know, part of the craziness with broadband is the incumbents will give you a map, and they'll say, all right, I got one person in this zip code, and presume you got the whole county covered. So we know how screwed up the maps are. That is being worked through. So I think there is some recognition. Yeah, Wendy?
I wanted to make a comment on that. So this has been a very business-focused discussion, as it should be in this setting, but let's think about the intent of the ARP money. It's the American Rescue Plan. What we learned in COVID, it's not just business that is so desperately in need of broadband to every house. It's also education, and it's medicine, telemedicine, telehealth. So, I know I'm talking less statistics and more humanity, in my opinion. That's where the money needs to go.
But I'd also say, if you're trying to attract a business, no business is going to come if their kids have got to go to a hotspot in a high school parking lot, or for that matter, if you're going to work at home. So I think it is a complete mesh of what family needs are along the community. And I commend, one of the things I think is just blown me away, I'm really proud of, and I think, again, a lot of it is due to the opening up of the middle mile to allow the utilities to build. But the fact that so many communities in Virginia have kind of gotten off their duffs and in the last 12 months making these commitments, and it's happening all over. We will be the leader on this issue.
I also had some concerns and questions regarding workforce issues, and if there are any dollars that are there available that are going to be able to funnel through whatever the plans are going to be. If it's going to be, right now I see a big problem with childcare being an issue that we need to be able to get people to have their children go back so they can return to work. Any kind of dollars?
There is, and this is, we're all kind of in this room, I'm sure, pretty united about the infrastructure plan. I imagine if we got into the second bucket, there would be less unanimity. Although when you hear the $3.5 trillion number, just remember one thing, there's a lot of stuff in that, but that is over 10 years. So it's a net 350 new each year, which pales in comparison to the $5 trillion we put in the last year. So in that second round, there is $200 billion on childcare infrastructure. A lot of that, some of that will be subsidy, but a lot of that is to actually invest in rural communities to make grants available to actually start some childcare centers, because in many rural communities, as we found, you just don't have, you don't have the capacity. So that'll be in the second round, and I do think the childcare piece, some of these pieces will probably not make it all the way through in the kind of very ambitious plan, but childcare I think is one that will. Okay?
I want to go back to and piggyback on something that Delegate Goditis had brought up, this issue of the ARP money. In talking to many of you all locally, our elected officials, it does seem like most of the ARP money is going to infrastructure improvement and equipment purchases. And I think part of that dynamic is because this infrastructure bill was in flux. And there are, all localities have a lot of infrastructure needs for sure, but there is a element within this ARP funding to support vulnerable populations. And from my perception is that most of that, a lot of that money is not going to go to the vulnerable populations. And so I want to make sure I'm understanding clearly. You're advocating then that if the localities spend their ARP money towards equipment purchases and infrastructure improvements, that when this infrastructure bill passes, that you're advocating that they can reallocate the money under the same requirements of the initial ARP funding? Could it be used for vulnerable populations?
The short answer is, yeah, that is my goal. That you would simply supplant
Well, you can't supplant because you'll end up being in federal prison.
But
You could reallocate.
Reallocate. You can tell I did go to law school, but I never practiced law. So. All right, you're right. You're right. But that is what I've been. That is my goal, and I think one of the things that I would. Let me also try to get you additional clarity. I don't know whether we can give you the definitive word because the bill hasn't been passed and the pieces haven't been signed into law and the program hasn't been fully initiated. But maybe what I ought to be doing is writing. Let me think about how I can start building a record so that we can help give you guys. I know I'm going to go in a minute, but make sure we don't get you stuck because even if you guys haven't signed your contract, a whole lot of other communities have really gone out. Like Louisa County went out and spent $35 million even before ARP. Louisa not exactly reason everybody's conservative is the valley, and so I commend the boards of supervisors who are taking the lead, but it's a very fair question. All right, David?
We have time for just one more question.
One or two, I'll take two.
First of all, Senator, I want to thank you for holding this roundtable. It's greatly appreciated, and we need it. You have mentioned statistics about the workforce. Many of the workforce people are going to be going into other professions. And we're seeing this on a regular basis, especially in the restaurant business. So my fear, and we're talking about infrastructure here, is that you have people leaving certain workforces going into others, and then you have these mom and pop businesses closing, and even some franchises. So you have a lot of empty properties, real estate. So it forces the locality to start thinking about how to reallocate and to reinvest into these communities. The money that's coming forth, do you have any suggestions of how, being a businessman yourself, how communities can start reinvesting back into the community to support the workforce that they're losing?
This will be the last question because this is like the hard. That's like really. Let me just give you a couple ideas. One, there was appetite, and clearly, if I echo Wendy, I hope people all get vaccinated. We can go back to mask wearing so we can get the variant and COVID behind us. But there was appetite, bipartisan, to put another slug of money into the Restaurants Act. Didn't get through, but I think there is, if this continues, either the Restaurants Act or the PPP, broadly bipartisan, there could be another slug coming. So that might give you a little more cash flow to keep people. But I think there's that factoid of 63% of Americans thinking about getting a new job. That's stunning. There's never been a fact like that. In the next Biden bill, the bigger 3.5, this is there's a lot in there that I very much support. There's some of it that's, it's more controversial. It's frankly as many new social initiatives almost as the New Deal in one single bill. And a lot of the workforce training, the child care, how we make healthcare more affordable, prescription drug negotiations, all that's tied up in that. But I think both on a regional basis and I think there needs to be a whole lot of thinking about the subject you just brought up. And, you know, whether you take the city of Winchester and Front Royal and the communities that got kind of a dedicated downtown, and whether we think about even linking that together with like-sized communities around Virginia. You know, I live in Alexandria, Old Town. We got more vacancies than I've ever seen in the 40 years I've lived there now. And I don't think anybody's got a magic solution yet on how we're gonna, you know, fully fix this. But I'd love to try to help. I'd love to, maybe I can help convene, you know, like-sized cities or communities that got those downtowns, because I think having some good thinking. One of the things that is also in this next bill, and I don't know if it's become a huge problem yet here in the top of the valley, but it's housing. I mean, you know, even if you raise somebody's minimum wage to $15, if you can't get an apartment that's affordable in town, and we have not, as a country, in the last, you know, 25 years, made any real investments in affordable housing. We've done some workforce housing, but that's higher up the food chain line. There is $330 billion in the housing bucket in the next one, but again, that's contingent on whether it passes. But I think if you'd be interested, maybe we could talk some more about that. I think it'd be a really valuable idea to be thinking about. You've done such a great job in Winchester of bringing back the community and the downtown. You know, I mean, if that all suddenly is in jeopardy now, that's a big issue.
Thank you.
I again want to thank everyone and for being here. All of you, particularly county administrators and board of supervisors, all of you who've been doing that. The only job that's harder in an age of COVID would be a school board member. I think a school board member is the only job in America right now that there's no way you got to get everybody, or even the majority of people happy no matter what way you go. But I'm grateful for all your service, Faith and John, obviously, and Mark and CTB. Really grateful, Wendy, that you've done a great job in the legislature. But I think, this infrastructure bill, I think is going to give you the capital that you need to make the kind of long-term investments that's valuable. I owe you the flexibility to try to get you the flexibility to do it right. And I'll try to start making sure we deal particularly with the broadband case. I think but I do think we might not, I know we wouldn't all agree on everything that's in this kind of teed up next. So frankly, I've been very involved in trying to bring that number down. But I also think there's probably no better time to have a real debate about what the social contract ought to look like than coming out of this huge and horrible disease. And I do hope we will all take Wendy's admonition, urge our friends and colleagues and others to, best way we can get back to work is get the vaccine and stay masked. So thank you all. Thank you to the folks at the Inland Port for hosting me here. Keep up the great work. I want to make sure, Lee, that the next time I'm here, you got those new gantries and when are you going to when the first of the new lines coming in, the new rails coming in?
Right now, they're scheduled to arrive and be commissioned within the next year, I believe, is the current timeline.
Well, be well, everybody. Have a great end of the summer.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all, and try to make sure that we try to hold us accountable. Make sure we don't we actually take this record investment in infrastructure and get it to the president's desk sooner rather than later.